Hey there, we're taking a closer look at I Raised My Husband Wrong. Hit subscribe and let's go. A young lady approaches Kairos and calmly offers him a divorce. Her name is Levertisha. Right now, she is making one of the most important decisions of her life, hoping to get everything back on track. 10 years ago, the girl, by order of the emperor, married Kairos, then still a young duke. But due to an incident, she found herself trapped in another dimension. During this time, her husband changed beyond recognition and long ago ceased to be a naive child. Previously, he needed her protection, but now he has grown up and is able to stand up for himself, so she decides to end this marriage. Levertisha notices his silence and says that he is already old enough, which means divorce will be the best solution for both of them. They didn't want this union from the start, so this is the right thing to do. The young man only holds back his anger in response. He says that he was going crazy for 10 years because of her disappearance, and immediately after her return, she asks for a divorce and asks if this is a joke. He also asks if she understands how much time he spent searching. Levertisha senses that his reaction is not at all what she expected. She realizes that something is wrong, because the boy she always wanted to hug looked like a defenseless chick. He's become a completely different person in 10 years. The guy clenches his fists and tells her not to even try to escape from him. He claims it's impossible, and that all these years, he's only been thinking about her. The girl realizes the situation has gone too far. Levertisha recalls that Eugenia was a great empire that had conquered a continent, where the brutal struggle for power matched its greatness. The previous emperor left many heirs, and immediately after his death, a battle for the throne broke out. Many expected a civil war, but one of the princes drew a neighboring empire into the conflict. With all the contenders plunged into eternal slumber or exiled, dark times descended upon the continent. The only one to offer serious resistance was the current emperor. At his side stood his faithful shield and sword, Duke Valtail, commander of the White Knights, and a cruel assassin, vice commander of the White Knights named Levertisha. It was thanks to them that the emperor achieved victory. A few months later, someone approaches the main character and asks if she knows how many times he called her. The girl assumes that it was 3 times, but the interlocutor replies that he actually called her 5 times. Levertisha apologizes to His Majesty and asks what was discussed. The blonde man irritably says that she didn't listen to him at all, and reminds her that the country is just beginning to recover from the war and needs good news. He then proposes marriage to Duke Valtail. The girl slaps herself in surprise. The interlocutor is surprised by such a gesture, and she replies that it seems she is not fully awake yet. The emperor assures her it's not a dream. The girl asks if he's serious, and hears in response that the former duke was a renowned dragon slayer. His family has always been distinguished by wealth accumulated over generations, and the emperor considers this union ideal for them. After all, they have always been his sword and shield, which means such an alliance will become a strong support for the entire empire. Levertisha says he understands what he's getting at, but reminds him that he knows it very well himself. The current Duke of Valtail is only 8 years old, and she asks if this is a joke. The blonde man replies with a smile that she is only 21, and the girl immediately cries out about the 13-year difference. The emperor, still smiling, asks if this is a problem, since he himself got married with a difference of 28 years. Levertisha says he's laughing, even though they went through war because of decisions like these. He simply replies that who else could make such a joke, and assures him that in 10 years the guy will be a real handsome man. He adds that Duke Valtail, who valued her so much, would have welcomed this union had he lived. His family had long hunted dragons. He was also the commander of the White Knights, who played a key role in the war. One day, he proposed stopping the carnage. Then he extended his hand to Levertisha and said that he needed her, and before these words, she had not even thought about such a thing. The blonde continues that no one expected such a man to become a victim of dark magic, and he certainly would not want to pass on the duchy to his son at such a young age. So this is truly a great loss. The girl agrees, and the emperor reminds her that the current duke also has enemies. He needs a strong guardian, power, and wealth, and he asks if he is not right. Levertisha recalls being the adopted daughter of Viscount Seltzer, in a family with loving parents and a kind younger brother. It seemed that their happiness would last forever, but 10 years ago, the couple's carriage crashed. Rudel and Levertisha were left alone, surrounded by greedy adults who wanted to take over the orphanage. The girl had to study hard and fight to protect her family, and all their energy was spent just on survival. They placed their trust in Baron Wilfred, the Viscount's younger brother. Levertisha followed him, unaware that his care would lead to her death. Later, the shocked girl asked her uncle about the strange contract, but he showed her an IOU with Rudel's signature. The Seltzer family found themselves in debt. He tricked the boy into signing a document, intending to consume the family through debt. As he left, he said that Levertisha knew how to handle a sword and could make money from the war, and Rudel would stay with him until the debt was paid. She had no choice, and endless debts led the girl to the battlefield. Even the nickname of being obsessed with money didn't bother her, because she was only thinking about saving her brother and the Seltzer family. So she told the emperor that power and money were important to her, but she was interested in the opinion of the young duke. And does he even know about such a marriage? The emperor replies that this is the essence of a marriage of convenience, and the girl is surprised that he doesn't understand this. For her, it would be like marrying Rudel, even if they were the same age. She doesn't want to manipulate the child and drag him into adult problems. Levertisha says that she will think about the offer, but when she is about to leave, the emperor asks, "What if this is an order?" She replies with a smile that she doesn't care, because she doesn't plan to marry the child. That's what she said then, but fate decreed otherwise. Now the girl stands before the duchy. One of the knights asks if the captain refused to marry the duke. Levertisha confirms that she did, but he asks if he remembers the emperor's order. The knight replies, "Of course. This is Vice Captain Barton of the White Knights, and they've arrived to deliver the previous duke's belongings." The girl lightly hits him on the head and says that he is only half right. She recalls that the main task is to deliver a pendant that belonged to the former duke. They must also ensure that the current duke wears it to the banquet. If everyone sees this relic given by the emperor, it will become official confirmation. This will emphasize the strong connection between the ducal and imperial families, and Levertisha clearly understands that they are trying to bring her together with the duke. They enter the room, and the butler asks them to wait while he brings the duke. When the girl looks around, she is surprised to see the Scarlet Knights there. She understands that they are the same defenders of the empire as the White Knights, but this is an elite of high nobility, for whom honor and dignity are above all else. In contrast, the White Knights, to which Levertisha belongs, value skill regardless of origin. They were sent to the very front lines, where students did not risk going, and in the war for the throne, Levertisha's contribution was enormous. Therefore, the emperor's trust in the White Knights grew, while the Red Knights could only watch and criticize. Relations between the squads were tense from the start and only worsened over time. The only thing that kept open conflicts at bay was the difference in their objectives. Now Levertisha understands that since the mission has been entrusted to them all, old disputes will have to be put aside and the order will have to be carried out. At this point, one of the knights asks why she is so tense, and whether the emperor really dislikes the White Knights so much that he entrusted them with the delivery of the pendant. This is Vice Captain Egan Kellers of the Scarlet Knights. He adds that their reactions show they knew nothing, or maybe they're so stupid they don't understand shame. At this point, a high-ranking White Knight jumps up and demands they watch their language. But the blonde replies that it is not for mongrels to judge, and the other knights laugh. Levertisha remains silent until someone points out that everyone has heard of the White Knight, who can put anyone into eternal sleep for money, and asks if they would stoop to such a level. The girl calmly confirms this, and says that for a good sum, she can put even noblemen into eternal sleep. She asks if he wants to offer her money, and the guy is clearly at a loss. Levertisha adds that the entire court knows about his bribes, and that they also bought themselves off from the war with gold. Then she asks if he was really that scared, and the vice captain cries out how she knew that. With a smile, the girl asks what he will do, since it was he who always solved problems with gold. But it's not going to buy her, and Egan gets angry, demanding that she stop talking nonsense. He threatens to deal with the dog first, but Barton stops him and asks him to tone it down. He reminds him that he is speaking to the commander of the White Knights, and the others whisper in shock, recognizing the leader's emblem. Someone asks if the appointment ceremony has already taken place, and if the girl received the position during the chaos after Duke Valtail fell into eternal sleep. Levertisha thinks about how noisy it is here, and is surprised that anyone expected an official ceremony in the middle of a war. She understands that the Palace Knights do not know news from the battlefield, but the respectful address by rank remains unchanged. Egan realizes that he has barely become vice captain, and this girl is already leading the order. Levertisha sees his thoughts and understands that now he will at least calm down a little. She begins to worry about what the Duke is doing and why there is still no news from him. Suddenly, she hears a strange sound, and wonders if something bad has happened to the boy. The girl immediately stands up and asks Barton if he heard it. The blonde man asks what's going on, and Levertisha opens the window and says he'll go check, leaving him inside, just in case. When she jumps down, the guy screams in shock that it's the 3rd floor. He calls her crazy, and the girl, meanwhile, approaches the maid and asks what happened, because she heard a scream. The maid cries out that the Duke is upstairs, and Levertisha looks at the tree. She wonders if this boy is the current Duke of Valtail. Another maid asks if he's climbed the tree again. They keep calling his name, but he pretends not to hear. The girl sees that he looks even younger than she imagined, and she doesn't know what to do now. At this moment, Levertisha herself begins to climb the tree, and soon finds herself next to the young man. She notices his gaze, as if penetrating into the very soul, and says that she is glad to meet the Duke. Levertisha introduces herself as the commander of the White Knights. The boy, surprised, asks who she is. He tells her to leave, and the girl mentally calls him an impudent little brat and extends her hand. But the Duke himself jumps down from the tree and immediately starts running. The maids rush after him and ask him to come back, because the guests are waiting. Levertisha notes that he's fast, but looks more like a kitten than a wild animal. She realizes he knows next to nothing about her, likely due to his age and unfamiliarity with war. She realizes that the guy is wary and that getting closer will not be easy, so she decides to act carefully and without pressure. Meanwhile, the young man goes deeper into the forest and thinks that they definitely won't find him here. Suddenly, he remembers that he forgot his book, a rarity on the entire continent. He gets angry and thinks that it's all that woman's fault, because he climbed the tree for the sake of silence, and she ruined everything. The boy ponders who she is, recalls her words about the White Knights, and realizes that this is his father's order. The thought occurs to him that she might be the new commander. Her movements are completely different from those of the Knights of the Duchy and are too reminiscent of his father. This irritates him, but at that very moment, Levertisha appears next to him and asks if everything is okay. The guy recoils in shock and asks how she ended up here. The girl silently hands him the book. She says that she came to return it and asks if it is his thing. The red-haired boy takes the book and asks again who she is. Levertisha replies that she is a knight from the Imperial Palace. The boy says that's not what he was asking and asks if she knows who he is. She replies that she knows that the person in front of her is Duke Valtail, the heir to his father who died from dark magic, and asks if this is true. The young man confirms and asks why. She then speaks to him so disrespectfully. Levertisha says she's always brazen, even in front of the Emperor. The guy remarks that she still has her wits about her, and she replies that she knows her place perfectly well. The young man is about to leave, but the girl follows him and notices that he is quite agile, asking if he has been training. She notes his endurance and awareness of his surroundings, and thinks his father clearly trained him. The guy coldly asks to shut up and not bring up this topic. Levertisha is surprised and apologizes. Kairos notices her sudden politeness, and she repeats that she knows her place. The young man thinks that this woman is strange and funny, without a drop of nobility and dignity. It's the first time he's seen an adult sulking so openly. The girl asks if she's gone too far. She says she just wanted to return the book and make friends. In response, the guy tells her his name. Levertisha doesn't understand, and then he repeats that his name is Kairos Valtail. The girl smiles and says she's already introduced herself, but repeats her name. He remarks that it's difficult to pronounce, and she suggests he call her whatever he likes. At this moment, Levertisha realizes that the boy really does look like his father. And not only in appearance, even his energy is the same, and over time the similarity will become even stronger. The boy asks what she is looking at, and the girl thinks that now he is just a kitten. Levertisha asks where he's going, but he chides her for being too familiar and refuses to answer. She suggests whispering if he's shy. After some time, they approach the estate, and the girl realizes that he ran away only to return later. The butler turns to the Duke and says that they have finally waited for him, asking where he has been. Kairos briefly replies that he was leaving. The butler apologizes to the guests, and Levertisha says everything is fine, understanding how difficult the day has been. They enter the hall where the knights are sitting, and one of them asks in surprise if this child is really Duke Valtail. He admits he knew he was young, but didn't expect this. The young man sits down at the table and asks why they were looking for him. Levertisha notices that his feet don't even reach the floor. Someone reports that they brought him the pendant of the late Duke of Valtail. The guy looks coldly at the jewelry, and the girl wants to say something, but the vice commander of the Scarlet Knights, claims that the emperor personally ordered this relic to be delivered as a sign of respect to the duke. Levertisha watches the boy's expression closely. The blonde continues that the emperor hopes to see the pendant on the duke during the banquet. Kairos clenches his fist and says there is no need for that, asking that his words be conveyed to the emperor. He adds that he will not wear it to the banquet and takes the pendant in his hand. Then he throws her on the floor and orders her to be returned to the emperor. Everyone freezes in shock, and the vice captain says that this is a gift from His Majesty. He asks if the duke is trying to insult the emperor, and the boy replies that they held a funeral without a body. Now they are asking him to be content with the decoration, and he asks who is actually insulting whom. The blonde is at a loss, but Kairos calmly says that he has already made it clear that he does not need the pendant. Egan tries to speak again, but the duke replies that he is tired of talking and asks them to leave. Levertisha says they will come back another time if that is his answer, and the vice captain of the Scarlet Knights is surprised. He reminds her that this is the emperor's assignment, but the girl orders him to stop being rude and leave. The blonde is angry but obeys. The duke, meanwhile, is thinking about what she said about returning. He wonders about this woman's intentions. Meanwhile, in the tavern, someone shares a new rumor. They say the Duchy of Valtail will soon fall. The friend is indignant, but they tell him that the Scarlet Knights are discussing this themselves because the Duke is only 8 years old. The vice captain of the White Knights sighs and says that these rumors do not subside. He asks Levertisha what they will do and if she has a plan. He reminds her that the Emperor's orders must be carried out. The girl replies that the Emperor foresaw all this and is simply amusing himself by creating problems. Barton remarks that this is disrespectful, but Levertisha says that the truth remains the truth. The Emperor knew how the Duke would react and assigned her the mission to see their conflict. But she can't refuse, and she will have to meet this sweet face again. The girl says she wants to go look for the meters, and Barton asks, surprised, what she means. Levertisha orders another mug, but Barton says she's had enough, and it's time to leave. Scarlet Knights enter the tavern, and one of them boasts that they taught the Duke a lesson, calling him useless. He then notices Levertisha and mockingly points at her, calling her a pathetic commander. The girl says that she is not drunk and can walk on her own, but at that moment someone grabs her hand. He claims he stumbled upon something dirty, and Levertisha asks who else it is. She recognizes him as Enzod, captain of the Scarlet Knights. The man coldly orders not to pronounce his name with a dirty mouth. The vice captain of the White Knights understands that a fight is inevitable and turns to the captain. But Levertisha says with a smile that she doesn't like his name either and she's just talking. She asks why he's making a fuss and calls him a pompous idiot. Enzod replies that it's vulgar and declares that the White Knights are finished with such a commander. The girl only laughs. She advises him to be more concerned about himself as the Scarlet Knights criticize him even more. Levertisha admits that she considered resigning after the mission, but now she is unsure whether Enzod is stupid or brave and asks if his men can do anything against her knights. The commander of the Scarlet Knights gets angry and says that she has a lot of confidence. He suggests making a bet, and the girl asks where he got this idea from. Enzod explains that the Emperor's mission is related to Duke Valtail and his appearance at the banquet with the pendant. If this happens, he will completely hand over the task to the White Knights and throw down the knife. The blade flies past Levertisha's head, and she asks if he wants to dump this problem on them. Enzod replies that he will offer terms that will please her if the White Knights succeed. Half of the Scarlet Knights' annual budget will go to her people, and the girl is surprised. But if she fails, she will have to resign and disappear. Levertisha asks how this is possible if the commanders are appointed by the Emperor. Enzod smirks and offers another condition, that she admit her incompetence and apologize on her knees. Barton asks the captain to stop, but he orders him not to interfere. Levertisha calmly asks if it is enough for him to simply put her on her knees. She picks up the fork from the floor and throws it where the knife is stuck. Then he asks if he wants to try to take her head. Enzod clenches his fists and says he won't get his hands dirty. He declares that she herself will plunge into eternal sleep somewhere, and the girl replies that it would be boring. Nevertheless, she accepts the challenge and says they won't lose. The vice captain looks at her in surprise. Levertisha adds that a year's salary is at stake and asks if they have enough money. Enzod grins and says that he knew she would agree and end up on her knees. He adds that she won't be able to change anything because the task must be completed before the banquet. Later, Levertisha lies in bed, and the vice captain talks about yesterday. She asks him to speak more quietly because of her hangover. He says the bet was reckless, and the girl asks if he has forgotten that she is willing to put people into eternal sleep for coins. The vice captain is still worried, and then she puts her hand on his shoulder, suggesting that he calm down. She asks if the White Knights can really be scared by such a simple task, since she always follows orders, so let the guy not worry and just calm down. Levertisha understands that she just needs to gently coax the child, and there won't be any difficulties with that. After a short time, the young lady comes to his lordship and addresses him directly. She asks if it's okay to lock people on a balcony and asks him to open the door. Levertisha realizes she didn't even have time to try to convince him before she found herself trapped. The young lady realizes she followed him when he wanted to show her something, but she should have known this guy would try to get rid of whoever was in his way. Since things have come to this, she has only one choice. The guy turns around and wonders if the girl has simply given up. Then he looks away and decides it's best not to look in her direction. He feels like the lady is pretending to be friendly for no reason. He knows it was His Majesty's order, but he tries not to dwell on it. The boy understands that he is capable of leading the duchy without the emperor's help. He needs to prove it, so he will become stronger, smarter, and do everything possible. 30 minutes later, the young man asks why dark magic. The young lady immediately asks if he wants to know why it's forbidden. The lady explains that this magic is capable of causing enormous damage not only to one side, but to an entire continent, which is why even in their empire there is a strict ban. The young man says that he now understands, but asks with surprise how the lady got there. The girl replies with a smile that she jumped from the balcony and entered through the door. After this, the young man calls her a monkey and asks where she got the cookies. Levertisha replies that the maids shared them because they are very devoted to him. The young man says that his opinion will not change no matter how hard she tries, and the lady's train has already left. But the girl just hands him the cookie and says that it's delicious, offering to try it. The guy calls her a crazy knight, and the young lady thinks in response how cute he is. Levertisha says that if he really wants it, she will leave, but he still hasn't kicked her out by force. The lady then asks if he is not at all interested in his own father's past. After all, the adults around probably showed politeness, consolation, or sympathy, but deep down they were probably glad it didn't affect their families. The guy asks how she knows that. The lady replies that she herself was often afraid, but she could not renounce her family and heritage. So she read as many books as possible and avoided people in order to gain strength and protect her family. The young lady thinks she understands this feeling well, having gone through the same path. But if you keep pushing forward without stopping, you'll eventually break, and the guy shouldn't repeat her mistakes. Then she says she's grateful for his hard work. She understands how the Duke feels, having once been just like him. The young man then says that the lady is definitely strange. The main character looks at him in shock and wonders if he really almost cried, although she just wanted to tease him a little. But she admires him for being able to restrain himself in front of a stranger. Levertisha suggests an honest conversation and asks why he doesn't want to accept the pendant. After all, she belonged to his father, but the young man replies that he is not his father. The main character asks what this means, but hears only silence in response. She realizes that the guy is not going to answer and decides to let him do as he wants. Although the girl never found out his true thoughts that day, she still continued to visit the Duke's estate. Levertisha made friends with the maids and played hide-and-seek with the young master. This can be called taming, and the girl thinks that they will become closer if she continues. At the same time, the butler turns to the Duke with concern, and he asks what happened. The servant replies that he has a guest. The boy asks who it is, and hears that Duke Everett has arrived. The young man tenses up, and the main character thinks that they are talking about the family of Enzod, the commander of the Scarlet Knights. The conversation promises to be difficult, because his status is equal to Duke Valtail, and they are not close enough for a simple visit. The main character wonders why he came and notices how the guy starts to tremble. She asks if he's okay and realizes he's scared. She thinks someone might have done the same to him as her uncle once did to Rudel. The girl decides he shouldn't look like that and puts her hand on his shoulder. The boy immediately asks what she's doing. The main character replies that Kairos Valtale should not be afraid of anything because he is now a duke. Let him remain calm and confident, and no matter what is going on inside, everything will be okay because she will protect him. The young man asks her to keep this promise, and she agrees. She also says that he may not know, but she is quite a renowned knight, including as an enemy of Duke Everett, who will try to drive her out at the first opportunity. The guy asks what she will do. The girl replies that he shouldn't worry, because their games of hide and seek will soon be of benefit. A little while later, they enter the guest room, and Duke Everett asks if the boy ate well. The young man answers affirmatively, and the man says he's been waiting a long time to visit him, asking if he's collected his thoughts. The young man replies yes and thanks him for his concern. The man says he's glad to hear that, but then remembers he forgot to introduce someone. As he's not alone today, he invites the person in. A young lady enters the room, greets the Duke, and introduces herself as Violet Everett. The man says this is his daughter, and she's turning 12 this year. He calls her kind and gentle, which is why the family calls her an angel. He also comments on her beauty and says that proposals are constantly coming in. The girl sits down next to her father and notices that his tea has gone cold. She asks if she can pour a new cup, as she's just studying the tea service. The guy is surprised, but agrees. The man says the girl is diligently preparing to become the future empress's assistant and believes that, at a different age, she could have laid claim to the throne. The brunette reminds him with a smile that she's only 12. Then she pours tea and says that people her age are much better. At this moment, the Duke thinks how awkward he feels and why the girl is sitting so close. The lady says with a smile that she has made tea and asks not to refuse until it gets cold. The guy closes his eyes and thinks when he will finally be left alone. At that moment, the girl drops the cup and it breaks, and hot tea falls into her hands. The man immediately screams, rushing to his daughter, and the maids ask if she is okay. The girl looks at her reddened hands and asks what she should do now. The maid shouts for a wet towel to be brought immediately and asks the lady to be patient for a little while. Someone asks how this could have happened, since if the Duke's daughter's hands were left scarred, it would lead to problems and even conflict between the families. The guy says he didn't do it, but the Duke only asks his daughter if everything is all right. The girl tearfully replies that everything is fine. She says that she met the Duke for the first time and was simply nervous, but asks him to be kinder to her next time. The man tries to calm her down, and then says with a grin that nothing would have happened if only the Duke understood her feelings. The boy thinks he only touched the cup and didn't push it, but he begins to doubt whether the fault really lies with him, and what to do if the girl gets hurt. At this moment, someone opens the window and tells them to wait, since this incident is not the Duke's fault. One of the maids wonders how the lady got here, considering it's the second floor. They remind her that it's dangerous to enter through the windows, but the girl replies that it's nothing, since she's already climbed a tree after the Duke. Someone asks what will happen if the lady gets hurt. The Duke's daughter immediately demands to know who this girl is and how she dares behave like that. The main character replies that she is pleased to meet you and introduces herself as the commander of the White Knights of the Levertish. The girl asks in surprise if this is really the same Levertisha from the White Knights. Duke Everett calls her a brat, and the young lady remarks that it is now clear from whom Enzod learned such words. She adds that the boy is just like his father. The Duke's daughter is outraged, calling this an insult to the Everett family, and demands the arrest of the rude woman. The main character replies that without an order from His Majesty, they won't lay a finger on her, because she is his first sword. The girl says she was told that her brother Enzod is the first sword. The Duke asks his daughter not to worry about such things. He advises simply ignoring the girl, as she doesn't understand anything. Meanwhile, the Duke watches the lady closely. He realizes that she did come and keep her promise, and he understands that he is no longer afraid. He says it's not his fault, since he didn't break the cup. The guy decides he'll keep his end of the promise. He explains that it was a light touch, not enough to knock the cup out of his hands. Levertisha replies that she saw it too, and as soon as the Duke extended his hand, the girl herself threw the cup on the floor. And for the daughter of the high-born Everett family, such behavior is a disappointment. The girl claims that she didn't do it, and asks if she is really being blamed for everything. The main character clarifies whether she is talking about the accusations, and adds that this is only advice, because with such skills, a lady would not last a day in the imperial palace. The theater stage would have suited her better than serving under the Empress. The girl gets angry, grabs a cup, and throws it at the main character. She asks how she dares to be insolent. Levertisha remarks that throwing cups is impressive. She asks if she was the one who was called a gentle angel. Violetta realizes what she's done and says she didn't mean to, but the father shouts at the dog to stop because His Majesty turns a blind eye to it too often. He says that her insolence must have a limit and asks how dare she behave like this with his family. Kairos stands before the young lady and demands that the Duke stop, as the blame lies with his daughter. He asks her to leave Levertisha alone. The protagonist is surprised, realizing that the guy is protecting her, even though he recently trembled at the mere mention of Everett. The man thinks how stubborn this boy is, then turns around and apologizes for the inconvenience. He says that they better leave and turns to Violetta, asking why she froze, since they are leaving. The man understands that this girl is interfering with his plans, because over time he was going to absorb the Duchy of Voltaire. But everything has changed, because before the boy was a quiet child, afraid to look up. But today he dared to contradict, which means we will have to deal with him later. After a short time, the main character's wound is treated, and she realizes that on the battlefield, it wouldn't even be considered a wound, so she can't believe how carefully everything was done. The Duke asks if her hand hurts. The main character doesn't understand what he's talking about and replies that she's fine. The guy asks why the hell she covered herself with her hands if she could have just dodged it, and what they would have done if it had hit her in the face. Levertisha asks if he is really worried about her, since worse has happened to Levertisha's little sister. The guy looks away and asks her to stop teasing him. Then he asks what he should call her. Is it really that hard to pronounce? He decides that from now on, she will be Letty. The girl agrees and calls the Duke Kai. The boy is indignant that she shortened his name without asking, but she notices that he did the same. The young man reminds her that he is 8 years old. He asks if the girl is a child too. She replies that no, and that she's older. When asked about her age, she says she's 21. The lady adds that she is still young, but the guy admits that he cannot believe it. The main character asks if Duke Everett always comes and behaves like this. The boy replies that yes, he often dropped by to ask about the duchy's affairs and about him. Levertisha realizes the old man clearly wanted more than just companionship. The young man admits that he is afraid of the Duke and that without the lady's intervention, he would have been found guilty of pouring boiling water on the Duke's daughter. The main character asks what exactly he told him, but the guy remains silent, and she understands that it is too difficult to talk about it. She says that as a child, she was also afraid of one person, so she understands his feelings. The young man wonders if she really had someone like that, because it's hard to believe. He asks who could have scared her, and if it was definitely a person. The girl is simply surprised by his tone. She says they could have a drink and talk, but he's too young for that. The Duke asks if she even knows what it means to be an adult and says he doesn't want to become as childish as she is. He asks what she is offering, and the lady replies that it is unfair that only she comes and tells everything. So she invites him to visit her. The boy is surprised, and the girl adds that he is welcome to come to the Imperial Palace if he wants to see her. The young man asks why she thinks he'll agree. The girl replies that she doesn't know whether he'll come or not, but she will still wait. After which she says that it is time for her to go and leaves. The guy asks how she can be so selfish and wonders if she really thinks he will come. But he decides that the girl will come anyway, so he is not going to go to the Imperial Palace. However, after 3 days, the young lady still hasn't come, and the guy wonders if she won't be back today either. He convinces himself that he doesn't care, because if Letty isn't looking for him, he won't have to hide anymore. The boy jumps out of the tree, and the maids immediately wonder if it is the Duke. One of them comes up and asks if he really was in the tree, since the butler was looking for him because of the guests. The guests are waiting in the Duke's room and have brought costumes for the banquet at the palace. The young man recalls being asked to wear a pendant at this banquet. He thinks that perhaps this is the invitation Letty had in mind, agrees, and says he will take a look. When he leaves, one of the maids notices that the Duke has changed and has become more reserved at the council. After some time, the guy goes to see a man who deals with clothes. At this time, the main character is in the training area of the White Knights. She asks if Barton is ready to attack and suggests that he begin, but the guy says he'd rather not take part in the bet. The girl asks what that means. He explains that he's talking about Duke Valtail's pendant. Levertisha asks if he's still worried. The guy says that this is not a joke, because there is only a week left, and they can't even leave the palace because of preparations for the banquet. He reminds her that she still has the jewelry, but Levertisha assures her that there is enough time. She then deftly disarms the knight and notices that his accuracy drops when he is distracted by his thoughts. She asks Barton to focus and not worry about the bet, because she has a plan. The guy says he can only trust her and asks what the plan is. The girl replies that it's simple. If she can't leave, then she needs to invite the other side here. The vice captain asks what she means and whether he will really come, as it sounds absurd. Levertisha clarifies whether he's referring to absurdity and announces that the Duke is already here. Roger, shocked, asks if this is true. The main character turns to the guy and says that she thought she would never see him again. The Duke replies that he did not agree to go to the banquet and was just taking a walk. Levertisha wonders if he really thought she called him only because of the pendant, but he still went to look for her first. She strokes his head and says he's a cute baby, but the boy asks her not to touch him. The main character asks him if he missed her and if he wants to hear her story. The guy replies negatively, and the vice captain doubts whether it's really the Duke. The atmosphere noticeably changes. The guy asks when she'll fulfill her promise, but the girl replies that it's too early. The young man asks why she called him at all, but the main character asks to wait a minute. She turns to the vice captain and asks if he's been training the junior recruits. He answers affirmatively, and the Duke asks her not to say he came to train. The girl says that a weak body means a weak spirit, and the guy needs physical training. She says that this is the only way he can hear her story. The Duke asks what this means, and the vice captain wonders why him. Levertisha replies that she has never trained younger children and is afraid of breaking something. The vice captain says he has already trained with the commander, but the girl pulls him closer. With a smile, she orders the order to be carried out. An hour later, Barton returns to the young lady. He says he's about to fall into eternal sleep. The girl praises him for his excellent work. The captain admits that he did not expect such speed from the Duke and was never able to overtake him. Levertisha says the guy is doing a great job and orders him to clean up the training area, which shocks him. But he does not dare to disobey the commander and sullenly thinks that it was in vain that he did not escape from this nightly group. The girl approaches the Duke and says that this is the first time she has seen a child exhaust her vice captain so much. The young man replies that he can fulfill at least one of her conditions. Levertisha says that the training is over and it's time to move on. The next step is a breakneck speed run. She scoops the boy up and runs, while he screams for her to let him go. Soon they find themselves in the dining room. The guy says he's curious about what she's up to, but asks why there's so much food there. Levertisha replies that this is her portion. Kairos wonders if this hall is only for knights, and if they all eat that much. The girl says she just loves to eat and offers him some, asking if he's hungry after all the running. The Duke asks if there's any poison in there. Levertisha is surprised, and the boy explains that he was taught to be careful about eating outside the home. He says that this is the advice of Duke Everett, and the girl understands that he has sown fear and mistrust in the child's heart. She says that if he doesn't want to, he doesn't have to eat. Then she gets more, and she takes a piece from his plate and eats it. The guy thinks that he is falling for Everett's words again, although he promised himself not to be afraid anymore. He still puts the spoon with food in his mouth, and the main character asks if it's tasty. Kairos replies no, but Levertisha notices he seems calmer now. She realizes she didn't call him for the pendant. I just wanted to give him a little freedom, because he lives under constant pressure from those around him. She believes he is capable of living a free and beautiful life. Soon they finish their meal. The protagonist asks him if he sees that there is no poison. The young man replies that he does. Levertisha says that since he's worked out and eaten well, it's time for a story. The guy asks if that's true. The girl answers in the affirmative and promises to tell about the man she feared and how she received the nickname of an assassin obsessed with money. The young lady wonders where to begin and tells him that she lost her parents as a child, just like him. She then talks about the incident with the carriage and Rudel, as well as Ulafred's defense. About the man she feared so much, she adds that her uncle got them into debt. Then he forced her to return the money, and all she could do was obey his orders. Otherwise, they would lose their family name, and her brother would become a slave. The Duke can't stand it any longer and exclaims, "Where do such madmen come from?" He says it's not her fault, because adults were supposed to protect her. Letty just wanted a peaceful life with her brother, and the girl realizes that she hasn't heard such words of support in a long time. It turns out to be an unexpectedly pleasant feeling. She asks the guy not to get upset, but he asks how one can remain calm in such a situation and whether she herself is not angry. Levertisha replies that, of course, she is angry, and that is why she called him, because Duke Everett wants to do the same to him. The guy is surprised, and the girl says that she understands how hard it is to talk about this. Therefore, she cannot abandon him because there is no guarantee that the Duke will not try to take control of him again. The young man admits he always wanted to earn his father's recognition. Levertisha asks if he's referring to the former Duke of Valtail. Kairos says she probably knows his father was a hero when he was born. At first, the guy admired him and wanted to become like him, but over time, everything changed. His father stopped coming home, and the last time he saw him was when he was 3 years old. People said they knew him well, but he didn't. The main character says that the Duke was busy managing the knights and apologizes. Kairos replies that it's okay, he's been told that often, and he's tried to understand it. He remembers his ailing mother, who would always say that Dad had won the battle again, and ask if he missed her. She continued to wait for the man who had left them. Mom believed that he would return if she was patient, and he trusted her words. She was bored, but did not interfere, and in the end, she never waited. The boy needed a father who could take care of his mother, not a hero who could save the world, but she believed in him until the very end. The main character remembers the commander and understands that he seemed like a hero even to her, half mad on the battlefield. The Duke was always willing to help, and she took that for granted. She recalls the day when the knight told the commander that his wife was in critical condition and asked if he would like to visit her. The man then replied that everything was fine and asked not to worry. The knight said his son was desperately searching for him, and they would sort out the expedition and he would be able to see his family. But the man just waved it off and told the guy to stop and not bring up the topic again. The commander claimed that he could not leave one step short of victory, and she then believed that he had good reasons to remain on the battlefield. However, it has now become clear that he gave his all to the war, turning his back even on his own family. The guy continues and says that it was then that he met Duke Everett, who promised to support him in place of his always busy father. He couldn't refuse because he wanted to be like this ideal adult. The main character thinks what kind of snake this Duke is, since he offered to replace her father, knowing that Kairos would not be able to say no. The girl says she has a rough idea of the kind of upbringing he received and how the man destroyed any trust in people other than himself. That's why the boy always ran away and chose solitude, unable even to eat peacefully outside the home. After all, Duke Everett, step by step, isolated him from the outside world and influenced his subconscious. The young man nods and admits that it was then that he began to avoid others. He was afraid to obey and at the same time afraid of being abandoned again, although he knew that his father was different. But still, somewhere inside, he blamed himself for the fact that his father had not returned, and silence hung between them. Then the main character hands him the medallion and says she's returning it. At first, the guy doesn't understand, but then opens the jewelry. Inside, he sees himself and his mother and says that this was his last gift, which he always carried with him. He thought he had lost it forever and cannot believe that his father took the medallion with him. The main character understands that the commander was her benefactor, but far from a good person for those around him. Therefore, she says that tomorrow the guy can come to the palace again, considering this a return of the debt. Levertisha promises to help him until he overcomes his fears. The young man hesitates and asks if he needs to go to the palace again, and the lady jokes about delicious food, to which he immediately disagrees. From that day on, the Duke began to regularly come to the palace for training, and the vice captain at first did not understand why the commander was training such a child. But now everything has become clear, because just recently he couldn't hold a sword, and now he's already capable of sparring. At this rate, he could surpass him in just a few years, and it seemed like an incredible talent. The vice captain praises the Duke for his work and suggests finishing the training. The guy breathes heavily and is happy about the end, but notices that Levertisha hasn't come today, although she always watched before. He asks if she is busy. The vice captain explains that the banquet is tomorrow and the commander has gone to meet with His Majesty. The guy realizes that there is almost no time left, and the ordered scarf has already been delivered. He didn't even notice how quickly time passed, and now he's thinking about how to present this scarf. Should we call it a keepsake? Because then she can laugh at him for the rest of her life, and the vice captain asks if he wanted to say something to the commander. At that moment, a scream is heard, and it turns out that it is a man from the Scarlet Knights. He is indignant at how the boy dares to criticize the Red Knights, and in response hears that it is unfair to leave the night guard at the banquet only to the White Knights. The Duke realizes that a conflict is brewing, and the vice captain suggests that he stand aside while he sorts things out. Then Egan appears and mockingly asks, who will stand in place of the pathetic commoners? The White Knight replies that security is everyone's responsibility and reminds them of their joint training, accusing the Red Knights of wanting to take all the glory. At this point, Barton comes up and asks what is going on, and the other vice captain rudely insults him. The Whites respond that any task is honorable for a knight, and the Duke considers whether he should intervene. He doesn't fully understand the essence, but he clearly feels the tension between the two orders. Barton demands that she stop this nonsense and leave before she returns. The Duke decides to intervene, but first wants to call Barton, and the blonde man sarcastically says that they have too much free time. He also asks if he is sure that the child will appear at the banquet with the pendant. After all, if Duke Valtail doesn't wear it, their commander will be humiliated. The guy is confused, wondering what they are talking about and whether Levertitia will really end up on her knees. The blonde continues to mock her and says that she already feels bad since she constantly complains about not having enough money. He assures that soon she will be taking money out of the pockets of her subordinates because she is a beggar among beggars. The knight can't take it anymore, shouts at him to shut up, and hits him in the face. A fight breaks out, and the Duke watches from around the corner until someone else appears. The question is raised as to what is going on here, and the knights recognize Commander Enzod. The blonde tries to shift the blame onto the whites, but Enzod tells him to shut up and says that fighting is unacceptable. He adds that rabid dogs have their teeth knocked out. The white vice commander tries to object, but Enzod gets angry and swings his weapon. The main character stands up for her knight and demands an explanation. The brunette is sarcastic, but the girl confidently says that it was his people who were looking for a fight. She suggests that they apologize and leave before things get worse. Enzod scoffs and pities the knights with such a commander, and Levertitia says that he clearly did not understand the situation. After this, they engage in combat, and the vice commander is amazed at their strength even with wooden swords. He understands that his commander is on a completely different level. Levertitia notes that Enzod has grown, but he is still no match for her. Enzod replies that she only has brute force, and the Duke does not believe that all this is happening in the palace. The boy asks if they should be stopped, but the knight replies that no one here can handle it. He says that you just need to wait for the right person, and at that moment a scream is heard. They are interrupted, demanding that the fight be stopped immediately. It turns out to be Eveline Simon, the emperor's assistant, who demands an explanation. She shames them for fighting in the palace and doubts whether they are worthy of the title of knights. The Duke notes that Levertitia would not back down even from the emperor, but argues with this woman. The vice captain explains that Eveline is responsible for the budget, and she warns about pay cuts. Hearing this, the knights immediately scatter. Eveline tells Enzod to leave too, and he turns around and threatens Levertitia. The girl sticks her tongue out at him and declares that all he can do is talk, since he still hasn't won over her. But Eveline immediately reminds that this also applies to Levertitia herself. The girl is about to leave and admires how Eveline calmed the knights with one word, declaring that she has things to do. Eveline grabs her by the clothes and asks why she is always in the center of conflicts. She warns that this is important for the mission and asks not to disappoint His Majesty, and Levertitia responds with a smile. Eveline asks not to powder her head and just get down to business. As she leaves, the main character wishes her luck, and then someone else speaks to her. Levertitia realizes it is the Duke and asks if he is hurt, apologizing for the mess. She says he witnessed a rather unpleasant scene and apologizes for nearly getting into a fight. The guy asks if she wants to apologize for something else. He reminds us of the bet, and soon the day of the banquet arrives. The aristocrats are talking, and the main character is standing at the entrance, where Eveline approaches her. She wonders why Levertitia is sighing on such a day, since yesterday she defeated the Scarlet Knights. Levertitia replies that the problem is with Kairos, who found out about the dispute and decided that he was being used. She tried to explain, but he asked her to forget about everything and did not want to listen. He considered it his mistake, and the girl sighed heavily. The vice commander asks who got her into this argument in the first place. The girl admits that the guy already has enough scars, and he wonders how he can trust someone who promised to help and bet on him. She's afraid he won't want to see her anymore, but the vice commander makes a sarcastic comment about his knees. Levertitia remembers this and says that everything can be solved if you deprive that guy of his memory. But Eveline warns that the commander will then be left without pay, and Levertitia replies that she is ready to take the risk. Eveline reminds that this is her first official appearance as a commander. At this moment, another commander comes up and mocks her carelessness. He claims that she is destined to fail and advises her to prepare for humiliation. Levertitia replies that if words are not enough, then fists are enough, and he accuses her of madness. They are interrupted by the news of the arrival of the emperor, who enters and apologizes for the wait. He says he met many old acquaintances. The commanders greet him, and he praises their work. The emperor sits on the throne and thanks everyone gathered. He declares that this is not just a banquet, but a celebration in honor of the victorious knights, and introduces his faithful support. It is Sir Enzod Everett, commander of the Scarlet Knights, and the hall immediately fills with admiring whispers. His Majesty introduces the main character, but rumors immediately begin to spread throughout the hall. One of the noblewomen whispers, "Is this really the same crazy girl from the battlefield? And how could the Emperor have entrusted the first sword to such a person?" The main character just thinks, "Let them talk," and looks to see if the Duke has appeared. The blonde notices that Duke Valtail hasn't arrived and wonders with a grin how their bet will end. The girl replies that rumors spread quickly, and the Emperor asks if she dared to be distracted from her duty and engage in betting. Levertisha says he even seems to like it, and he admits with a smile that imperial life can be stifling, and sometimes one wants some fun. Levertisha asks if he really wants to see her on her knees, and he asks if she's afraid of losing. The girl replies that a bet is a bet. The boy smiles as he notices that the 8-year-old has put the Empire's strongest knights in an awkward position, and he's curious to see how it all ends. The main character understands that the banquet has been going on for a long time, and it seems that the Duke will not come, but a few hours later his arrival is announced. She thinks it's impossible, and at that moment a guy enters the hall. He greets His Majesty, and the commander of the Scarlet Knights, noticing the absence of the medallion, smirks. He declares that he has won the dispute, and the aristocrats whisper to each other whether this is the very same heir. One of the ladies is indignant that she doesn't care about his age, but being so late is unacceptable. The Emperor greets the Duke and notes that this is his first public appearance since receiving the title. Someone talks about the Emperor's mercy, and another asks if it is because of his age and how old the Duke is. The blonde recalls that the previous Duke was a worthy man and was greatly relied upon, but after using dark magic, there was no trace of him left, and silence fell over the hall. The young lady thinks she knew about the Emperor's cruelty to newcomers, but this is too much, and someone asks if the Duke really disappeared. One lady adds that she heard that the Duchess fell into eternal sleep because of this, and how sad it is. The main character thinks that these people still dare to call themselves adults and takes out her sword. She can't listen to this nonsense in silence, and she hits the floor with her sword with all her might, causing it to crack. The Duke is surprised, and one of the aristocrats cries out that the madwoman has broken the ceremonial sword. The girl apologizes to the Emperor and says that she heard a disgusting noise in the sacred hall, and he calmly replies that he expected something like this. Looking at the Duke, she sees his surprise and wonders if he thinks it's a pretense. Even if he hates her, she will still be on his side, and winks at him, as if urging him to be himself. The guy bows and says that he can't replace his father yet, but he will try. He then takes out the pendant and says that he will keep this expensive gift from His Majesty. The main character smiles, realizing that he did bring the medallion after all. The Emperor also smiles and says that the boy looks like his father, adding that he had fun. He says he looks forward to the Duke's future achievements, and later the Scarlet Commander addresses Levertisha. He says she's lucky, but she interrupts and advises him to focus on his subordinates. After all, it's scary to trust them, even with the outer perimeter, especially with a commander who has lost a year's salary. The brunette leaves and the girl waves after him and advises him to return to his knights. At this point, someone asks if she has won, and turning around, she sees the Duke. He asks if she has anything she wants to say, and the girl apologizes for taking part in the bet. She admits that she didn't want to hurt him and that she is ashamed and asks for forgiveness. The guy is silent, and then says that he will forgive her, but only this time. He remembers that she supported him and will not hate her because of one mistake. Levertisha looks at him with a pleading expression, and he reminds her that he helped her win the argument. He demands his share, and the girl says that she has no money, to which he replies about the salaries of the Scarlet Knights. Levertisha explains that the money will go towards repairing the ceremonial sword. The Duke says that then another solution will have to be found, and the girl asks which one. He offers to let her accompany him for an hour, but he is immediately surrounded by ladies. They greet him and offer to get acquainted, and Levertisha understands that he is looking for protection. Violetta comes up to him, introduces herself, and asks if he has forgotten her. The guy replies that he couldn't, and she admits how glad she is to see him. She apologizes for the past and invites him to visit, but the Duke says he doesn't have time. Violetta suggests that she come herself, and he asks if she is afraid of burning her hand again, but she insists. The Duke remarks that he did not allow himself to be called by name, and Levertisha realizes that he can't handle it himself. Someone jokes that he didn't know how close they had become and asks if they look good together. The main character thinks that this is not true at all. She says they met again, and the man asks how she is doing. The girl replies that everything is fine thanks to one person, and he warns her not to get close to the Duke. Levertisha replies that he is not a parent to interfere in the Duke's life. The man says he might become one soon, and the girl asks what he means. He announces that he is going to ask for permission for Kairos and Violetta to marry, and Levertish is shocked. She realizes that he was unable to subjugate Kairos and now wants to absorb the family through marriage. The girl asks if he thinks the Emperor will agree. The man replies that he is sure because he will ask her about it. It reminds us of the Emperor's character and his willpower. But he says that now the great families must unite for his sake. He adds that if she has no ideas, then she will not refuse a loyal vassal, and Levertisha doubts his loyalty. She recalls that several years ago he served another prince, and that it ended with the execution of the traitor. It is good that the Duke escaped such a fate, although the man is angry. He thinks that this insolence will soon end, and meanwhile, the Duke is looking for Levertisha with his eyes. Kairos notices Duke Everett and sees him so angry for the first time. He worries that Levertisha has done something dangerous while Violetta tries to speak again. The Duke coldly asks her to leave, and the man addresses Levertisha with mockery. He asks if it reminds her of a battlefield, and she replies that they have plenty in common. The man asks how long the Emperor will be on her side, and she says until the end of the Duke's life. He asks if she understands her words, and Kairos decides not to stand aside. He drops the glass and says that he accidentally broke it, staining his clothes. He turns to Levertisha and offers to go with him to the restroom, and she asks if it is her place. The guy replies that yes, and asks to just follow him. The Duke watches them leave and becomes angry, thinking about the boy's insolence. In the break room, Kairos finally breathes a sigh of relief. Levertisha realizes that he has been holding back fear all this time. She thanks him for his help, realizing how much courage he mustered. The guy turns away and says that she helped him too, and he doesn't want to be in debt. The girl nods and reaches out to stroke his head, but he remembers the Duke's words about the wedding of Kairos and Violetta. She thinks that the union of the two families will strengthen the empire. This will bring great power and benefit to the Emperor, but if Kairos marries, she will no longer be able to protect him. She recalls how the Emperor proposed to her to marry him. Kairos asks if she's going to pet him. Levertisha happily strokes his head, and he pretends not to care. She realizes that she never intended to take that proposal seriously. Kairos hands her a box with a gift. The girl is surprised and asks if this is really for her, and he replies that the maids asked him to pass it on. She thanks him and says she will accept the gift, wondering with interest what is inside. Taking out the handkerchief, she is surprised, and the Duke asks if she likes it. He suggests simply telling the truth if you don't like the gift. Levertisha says it's something else and asks how he chose this pattern. The guy admits that he ordered it from Baron Balast. He chose the embroidery from the options offered and didn't even know the name of the flower. Levertisha says that this flower bears her name. Her parents invented it especially for their little daughter. They had long since fallen into eternal sleep, and she had almost forgotten about it, but now she sincerely thanks him. Kairos thought he had seen her smile before, but his heart had never beat so fast. The girl remembers how her mother once asked her if she knew the name of this flower. After this, the woman said that the flower was called Levertisha, and the little girl immediately asked if this was true, since then they had the same name. Levertisha immediately asked when she could see this flower, because she really wanted to. But the woman replied that the girl would not be able to see it, because the flower grows far to the north. She added that it was not scary, because her beloved Levertisha was enough for her. Now the young lady remembers her mother, but still wonders how this flower ended up in Estelle's shop. The guy replies that he heard a story from the Baroness 10 years ago about a visit from a Viscountess. She asked to make embroidery in the shape of this flower as a birthday gift for her daughter. However, the Viscountess never came to pick up the order, and he accidentally saw the work and took it. The young man cautiously asks if the Viscountess could have been the young lady's mother, but the girl says that this is strange because the uncle claimed that they crashed in a carriage. When they returned with her gift, the guy was surprised because the Viscountess had not taken the handkerchief. The main character realizes that someone has lied, and at this moment, in the capital's underground gambling hall, a cry for an all-in bet is heard. This man turns out to be Levertishi's uncle, Wilfeld, and the rest of the players immediately give up. Someone asks if the Baron has won again, and the man calmly takes the chips and apologizes. He then offers to bet even more, but at that moment the main character pins him to the table. She says that her uncle has won too much, and that luck is clearly on his side, which greatly surprises him. Some people are outraged that the girl dares to behave like this, but others suddenly notice the Emperor's sword. People are overcome with fear. One leaves, saying that it is none of his business, and another suggests calling security. The girl calmly replies that they are late because all the security guards are already unconscious, and the hall instantly empties. One of the runners whispers that there won't even be bones left of them if that dog catches up with them. The young lady turns to her uncle and says that now they can talk calmly, because he lied to her. The man denies this and is indignant at how she dares to act like this, reminding her that she owes him. The girl asks if he has forgotten who caused her to end up in debt in the first place. She places a handkerchief on the table and asks him if this object is familiar to him. After all, this is a gift that her mother prepared 10 years ago, and all this looks too strange. The creator of the scarf said that it was never picked up, although the uncle insisted that the carriage crashed on the way with the gift. The Baron asks if she really made all this fuss over the scarf, since perhaps it was for Rudel. But the girl hugs her uncle tighter and says that no, she remembers everything perfectly. The parents were delayed because they had traveled far away, and he was talking about a big accident due to the night road, and that they returned with her gift, and she was little then and blamed herself. It seemed to her that her parents had fallen into an eternal sleep because of her birthday, and all that remained was fear for herself and her brother. Levertisha could not calm down and tried to conduct an investigation, but the imperial investigator was put into eternal sleep by an unknown person, and all evidence was destroyed without a trace. It was as if everything had been planned in advance, and the young lady headed for the exit, talking about the inconsistencies. She is sure that she will soon find out the truth, but the man only calls her ungrateful. He asks if she realizes who she attacked and threatens to make her regret it. Meanwhile, in the Duchy of Everett, the family sits at the table, and the commander of the Scarlet Knights asks the father about the Valte boy. The man pretends not to understand the question, and his son talks about his caution and dislike of the imperial family. After all, his father himself said that he would not serve the emperor, but in the end he took the oath and accepted the duty. Like a faithful mutt, the sister is nervous, and the father admits that the plan has failed. The guy says this happens with every plan they make. The father creates the appearance of a masterpiece, but in reality, all that remains is a blank canvas. The man orders them to stop this nonsense and states that the main flaw in the plan was the son. He hoped that it would hold back the mad dog, but it failed and turned out to be useless. After all, not only did he lose the bet, but he also allowed the Scarlet Knights to be defeated and banished from the palace. The boy tries to justify himself, but his father reminds him that they even crossed swords, and the son could solve the problem in a duel, to which he asks if his father wants him to put the girl into eternal sleep. The answer sounds evasive, because he was given strength and power, but he was surpassed by a girl without all of this. The guy gets up from the table, says he had lunch, and promises to destroy his father one day. The man calls him a weakling, then turns to Violetta and asks about her studies. The girl replies that everything is fine, and Madame Linnaeus praises her, but the man advises not to trust praise. Violetta promises to do everything to become the perfect daughter. The man smiles, says that this is wonderful, and announces a trip to the palace after lunch. There they will discuss the wedding with His Majesty, and the girl obediently agrees. Soon they are walking through the corridors of the imperial palace. The lady notices Duke Valtail and wonders what he is doing here. The man urges Violetta, and she quickens her pace. After some time, they enter His Majesty's office and greet him. The blonde man greets the Duke and asks what brings him here. The man makes a small request and is asked to continue. He mentions Duke Valtail's youth and expresses concern. Then he asks for help with the marriage between the Duke and his daughter. He fears that the Duke will not understand the reason and asks the Emperor to settle everything. But the blonde replies that he is too late, because Miss Levertisha has already received permission. Recently, the Duke himself came and said that Levertisha explained everything. The Emperor declared his desire for their marriage, and the young man confirmed that this was true. He adds that he hopes to see the Duke in the First Sword as his support. The young man objects, reminding him that although he is young, he remains the head of the duchy. The Emperor asks with regret if he really came to disagree. The young man inquires about the consequences of refusal, and the answer seems obvious, because then Violetta's husband would be someone else from the Everetts. The boy is shocked and the emperor warns him not to underestimate the duke's ambitions. He is capable of anything for the sake of a goal, and the main character confirms his words. She heard from the duke plans to marry Violetta to him. Once an offer is made, it becomes impossible to refuse, and the pressure increases. She apologizes for the awkwardness and says that the only way out is to become one family. She then asks directly if Kairos will marry her. The young man becomes embarrassed and says that they must protect the Valtail clan. The emperor calls them a good couple, but the girl asks him not to say anything strange. The blonde promises to prepare a wedding seal and jokes about the cake. The girl replies that there will be no celebration, and Duke Everett will find out too late. She even imagines the expression on his face as he angrily remembers her. After permission, they head to a pre-prepared church. In the carriage, the girl thinks about the troubles of a union without a blessing. She tells Kairos that everything turned out to be more fun than she expected. The guy doesn't understand because there are no guests, no banquet, no dress. Levertisha replies that there are no rules and the white uniform suits her. She says the main thing is to become a family, even if only temporarily, to protect him. The young man reminds her of her promise, and she suggests that they seal it with a pinky oath. They swear, and the girl notes that the promise will have to be fulfilled sooner. The carriage begins to tip over, but she tells him not to worry. She expected an attempt to disrupt the wedding and counted about 20 attackers. She soon deals with the last one, admitting that it was boring. The carriage is damaged, and they have to ride on horseback. But the Duke looks scared. He says that they tried to attack him, and without her protection, everything would have ended badly. Levertisha grabs him and demands that he pull himself together, reminding him of his warnings. Duke Everett will do anything to stop them, even if it's a last resort. She says that he has nothing to fear, because he will always be the head of the Valtail clan. And his wife is the strongest knight in the world, and his enemies will remember that. She offers to show everyone what happens to those who challenge him, and the young man agrees. As they continue walking, the guy says he'll forgive Letty if she wants to take something back. She's surprised and asks what he's talking about, since the couple already share the same fate. A short time later, they enter the church, and a young lady announces that the groom, Kairos Valtale, and the bride, Levertisha Seltzer, have arrived. The man notices a red liquid on her clothing and asks if everything is okay. She replies that it's nothing serious and asks if the recording device is ready, receiving an affirmative answer. The lady suggests beginning this tedious ceremony. The man is surprised, reminding her that this is a grace and that the vows must be recited in order. The girl agrees and asks to hurry things up. Troublesome guests are approaching them, and if they wait any longer, there will be no one to marry. The man becomes alarmed and announces that the groom, Valtail, and the bride, Seltzer, vow before God to become a sacred couple. He wishes for them to always think of each other. The Duke turns to the young lady, and she asks with a smile if he's frightened and offers to take his hand. The young man simply asks her to lean toward him a little. The protagonist does so and asks if that's how it should be. The guy says everything is fine and takes her face in his hands. Levertisha wonders what he's going to do. As the priest speaks of the value of vows and love, the Duke and Bobby kiss the young lady on the forehead. He says he can endure a little for her sake. The protagonist smiles, thinking how sweet it is, and the priest announces that the couple has taken their marriage vows. At that very moment, another Duke bursts into the church and shouts for Levertisha to stop immediately. The girl replies that she did not expect Duke Everett to appear in person, but he was late again, because the marriage had already been sealed with an oath. The man objects, asking if this is a problem, since everything can be easily canceled if she doesn't become a lady. Then the girl asks to let her say that His Majesty the Emperor was a witness to the ceremony. She asks if they want to be accused of putting the Duke and Duchess into eternal sleep. The Duke irritably mentions the cursed recording. He then asks if she seriously brought a child 13 years younger there, calling her disgusting. He turns to the boy and reminds him that he warned him to stay put, asking how he dared to do such a thing. He adds that it's no surprise his father abandoned him and his mother. The protagonist is about to respond, but the young man declares that it doesn't matter whether he abandoned him or not. He says that such a person's words are worthless. The man is indignant, asking how he dares to belittle him like that. The boy replies that they are both dukes and asks if he has any manners left. He declares that he is not his child, not his daughter's husband candidate, and not a dog. He says he won't allow himself to be brainwashed anymore. The man is shocked and wants to say something. The young lady declares that this is enough, and if there are no wedding gifts, he should go away. And don't disturb the newlyweds. After a while, breaking news starts to be heard on the street. It is said that Duke Kairos Valtail has married a bride 13 years his senior, and that he has made a 100-year vow with Lavertitia Seltzer. People don't believe it, considering it a joke, and discuss rumors because they were expecting a marriage with a noblewoman from the Everett family. At this time, the main character wakes up in the Duke's estate and notes that she slept well. She understands that she ended up here after the vows, and now they will have to play the roles of Duke and Duchess for his protection. She barely remembers the events after her return, as she went straight to bed, and is glad that she took a week's vacation. The girl thinks that she is very tired because of a lot of things to do, because she hasn't rested for a long time, and it feels like she slept for 3 days. Someone informs the mods that she's awake. It turns out to be a maid named Jessie. Jessie says she will be her personal maid and hopes that Madame will be comfortable with her. The main character is surprised by the address and understands that it suits the Duchess, but she feels awkward. The maid asks if she should cook the food, and the girl asks to be called by her name. The maid smiles, agrees, and addresses her as Miss Levertish. The girl notes that she's used to serious men and is unfamiliar with the sight of a sweet girl. Jessie says she's glad she's awake, as the Duke had been worried while she was asleep for several days. The main character understands that energy restoration always takes a couple of days, but this is the first time Kairos has seen this. The maid says that the doctor said that he was tired, but the Duke still walked around worried for 3 days. The boy mentally begged Levertitia to wake up, remembering her promise to be there. She was surprised he'd been there all this time. She says she wants to see Kairos and thank him, but the maid asks her to wait. Jessie wonders if she's really going to walk like that. Levertitia replies that she always walked like that among knights. Jessie reminds him that she's not there anymore and offers to help him change. The protagonist doesn't understand what he's talking about. The maid assures that everything is fine, admitting that there are not many outfits, but she has selected suitable ones. The girl wonders when Jessie managed to find out her size. She eventually jumps out the window, declaring she doesn't want to. Later, the maid writes to her mother about the new mistress. She writes that the Duchess is kind, but strange, and sometimes jumps out of the window, especially when people try to serve her. She adds that the Duke told her to just leave her alone. The maid decides to be more reserved and reflects on their relationship, which is more like a family than a romance. At this point, the main character asks Kairos if he should cut the meat. He refuses. She notices he's arguing, even though he hasn't even finished his soup. The young man says he can't eat mountains of food, and when asked about his height, he asks her to stop pestering him. Levertitia shoves a bun into his mouth, reminding him to eat a balanced diet. She talks about vegetables and meat, and the chef and butler are overjoyed with tears that the Duke eats properly. As for the Duchess, she personally handles the estate's finances and one day passes the records to a maid. She says she checked everything and found money leaks. The maid is surprised that the mistress did it herself. The girl replies that everything was clear, but some parts of the house require repairs. She even trains with knights and asks them to raise their hands higher during sparring. The lady promises to teach them everything and asks them to listen carefully. The knights call her madam, but she asks them not to address her that way. The maid, observing this, understands that with the appearance of the Duchess, the duchy seems to have come to life, and she considers the lady almost perfect, enjoying her work. Later, the main character says that she is hungry and invites Jessie to eat together, and she agrees. The maid then hands over the letter, saying that it is urgent. Taking the envelope, the girl realizes that this is not a letter from the knights and thinks that it is a report about her uncle's past. After reading it, she is shocked to learn that her uncle has gone missing. He was often alone, so his disappearance was not immediately noticed, and no traces were left. The Imperial Agency launched an investigation. While examining his room, the girl noticed it was tidy and there were no signs of a struggle. Then she sees something else and wonders if it's a bullet casing, even though there's no evidence of a gunshot. Picking it up, she notices a blue rose and realizes that only one group uses such a mark. These are dark magicians. The girl ponders their powers, from the creation of life to total destruction and time magic. Their intentions were once noble, but their inhumane experiments led to the banning of dark magic. However, they did not disappear, hiding and expanding their influence. The previous Duke of Valtail was put into eternal sleep by dark mages right before her eyes. Now she remembers that it was a magical item, an annihilation bullet. Those pierced by it disappear without a trace, and since the cartridge case was in the uncle's room, So he wasn't kidnapped, but annihilated. The girl doesn't understand why, since her uncle was a worthless man. He was just gambling, but she remembers his strange words about plunging into the eternal sleep of his parents. He asked if she knew who she had attacked and threatened her. The girl wondered if the murder had been staged. She realizes that dark magicians could be involved and decides to start an investigation. A few days later, she is in the palace, where the emperor says that they are on the trail of dark magicians. They have been hiding for a long time, and now they have finally started to move. The girl wants to leave immediately, but the emperor asks to listen to him, and she agrees. He talks about an unfrozen lake deep in the continent, where traces of dark magicians were found. Levertisha asks if this is a new experiment. The emperor replies that it most likely is, and that it's the work of the group. Experiment or not, they're clearly up to something. The emperor admits he doesn't know what, but the girl doesn't care. She says they'll pay for everything this time. The blonde admits her temperament frightens him more than the mage's. He asks why she's like this today. Levertisha realizes she can't talk about her parents. She says that these are the enemies of the empire who put her commander into eternal sleep, and she finds it hard to contain her anger. She asks permission to begin preparations immediately, and the emperor agrees. As she leaves, someone addresses her and the girl recognizes Eveline. The blonde talks about a personal conversation and reports that the creditor has disappeared and the debt will be frozen. According to the laws of the empire, payments cease, and after 10 years the person is considered to be immersed in eternal sleep, and the debts are transferred to relatives. Levertisha says that it is still not enough, thanks Eveline, and is surprised by her concern. Eveline adds that after the mission, she'll have a long vacation. Levertisha is surprised, and Eveline is angry. She says the girl rushes into danger like a moth into a flame, especially after hearing about dark magicians. Since the debts are on hold, let her do something else. And most importantly, she now has a family. Later, over dinner, the heroine realizes that Eveline is right, but she can't abandon the mission. The Duke asks her if she has any problems. She replies that it's nothing. He notices she isn't eating and comments on the chef's suffering. He tearfully asks if the food was bad, but that's not the issue. The girl says she's leaving soon on a mission. The guy doesn't believe her, despite her words about safety. He says that he has already heard such promises from his parents. He ends up alone and asks what will happen if she disappears too. He leaves the table. The girl calls him, realizing she's been careless, but there's no time to talk anymore due to preparations. Kairos was overwhelmed with the Duke's duties, and the conversation never took place, but it was time to leave. The maid and chef bid the lady farewell and ask her to return safely. The chef hands her lunch and asks her to take it with her. He says his heart breaks at the thought of bad food on the road. The maid hugs her mistress and asks her not to scratch her. Levertisha marvels at how they've become so attached in just a few months and thanks them. Then she looks at the Duke's office and wonders if he's really not coming to see her out. She expected at least a few words. The vice captain announces that it's time to move out. The young lady agrees and gives the order to depart. At that very moment, someone calls her name, and the voice seems familiar. It's the Duke. He hugs Levertisha tightly, apologizes, and says he was stubborn, because she's not leaving of her own free will. The girl replies that everything is fine, understanding that he needed time. He admits that he no longer fears the other Duke, but he fears losing Levertisha. She wipes his tears and tells him she won't disappear. Today, for the first time, he looks like a child, and he replies that he wants to grow up quickly and follow her. Levertisha asks him to eat well, sleep well, and exercise while she is gone. The young man smiles, promises, and tells her to come back soon. At this time, the dark magicians report that the preparations are complete and everything is going according to plan. The main character checks the squad's readiness and orders them to make sure that all weapons are in order. One of the knights reports a problem, as the commander of the Scarlet Knights is also there. Later, Levertisha clarifies whether this means he is participating in the mission on the Emperor's orders. The man remains silent. Then he confirms the order. The girl becomes irritated, thinking she already has enough problems. Now she'll have to work with someone who constantly provokes conflict. She claims this is a White Knight's mission, and she disagrees. She is about to file a formal complaint, but the brunette turns to her. He asks to join and says he has something he needs to do. Levertisha replies that she doesn't trust him after what happened last time. The man says that trust is not needed. He swears not to interfere and sincerely begs. The girl is shocked and wonders if this is a dream, because the proud commander bows his head. The vice captain asks if he's completely lost his mind. Levertitia agrees that it looks like it. She understands that this is extremely important for him since he is going without his knights. She hesitates, realizing that refusal could lead to problems for Kairos. In the end, she agrees, clarifying that she doesn't like him, but the mission is dangerous and an extra hand wouldn't hurt. The brunette replies that it would have been enough to simply say that he was not needed. Levertitia declares that he is a subordinate here and will be sent back for disobedience. He agrees. She asks if he's sure. He asks not to make him repeat it. The girl demands a formal answer, reminding him of discipline. His insolence is unacceptable. He replies that he understands and will obey. She asks again, and he confirms. Levertitia is surprised that he actually did it, despite his pride. She realizes that the dark magicians have added another headache to their arsenal. Later, the squad finds itself in a forest, and the vice captain asks if there were any problems. The girl replies that he is silent and does not use formal speech. Intelligence reports that the enemy has been detected. Levertitia orders them to take up positions and reminds them that the goal is to destroy the enemies. She takes over the base under the lake, and Barton closes the trail and catches the fugitives. No one is to leave, and the squad confirms the order. The lady gives the signal to advance. When the knights disperse, she addresses the vice captain. He asks what happened. The girl wishes for everyone to return alive, and Barton jokes about her sentimentality. Levertitia replies that she just wanted to say it. He asks her to be careful, and she agrees. The brunette watches her and goes his way. Later, the heroine is already at the base. Cries of retreat and warnings of magic bullets are heard. She understands that the group is truly huge and the base is much larger than expected. If the enemies were prepared, things would be worse, so we need to act quickly. She understands that it would be easier with Barton, but he is busy outside. No one should run away. The girl thinks that, after all this, she really does need a vacation. She considers that she should then visit Rudel and deal with Duke Everett for the sake of Kairos' safety, and then find him a suitable partner, and maybe even get some flowers. A little later, she thinks the base is almost clear, but someone might be lurking. Looking around, she realizes that she is the only one left on her feet and has no choice. Suddenly, a cry of disruption rings out. The girl realizes it's the Dark Mage. She then sees the Scarlet Knights, Commander saying that it was his father's plan, and freezes in shock. The Dark Mage reproaches him for his irresponsibility, and Levertitia wonders how he got involved with them in the first place. The stranger speaks of Duke Everett's plan. The girl is shocked, realizing why he came on the mission. She had hoped for his loyalty to the Empire, but now she sees him as a traitor. The man objects, saying that he is not the same as his father, but the magician tries to interrupt him. Levertitia intervenes and demands an explanation from Enzod Everett. She asks how he dares call himself a knight of the Empire. He remains silent. He says she'll find it hard to believe, but he tried to stop them. At that moment, the ceiling begins to collapse. The girl doesn't have time to answer, and stones fall on her. Waking up, she thinks about where she is, remembering the collapse and Enzod's connection with the magicians. She is surprised to be alive and notices a strange space without debris. It's like a curved space outside of time, without hunger or fatigue. She realizes it might be time magic. The traitor is breathing, but he's not coming to, and there's no way out in sight. Levertitia is worried about the knights and what is happening outside. The Emperor didn't know the truth. The White Knights were probably looking for her, and she promised Kairos to return. She wonders if she will stay here forever, and suddenly hears a strange sound behind her. Turning around, she sees a lizard and is surprised that there is a living creature here. The girl apologizes, thinking that she might have hurt her. She comforts her with the Duke's handkerchief, surprised at how useful it has been. Levertitia wonders where the lizard came from and is glad if it came from outside. She asks if she knows the way out, but realizes that she has received no answer. Suddenly, the lizard breaks free and points in the direction. The girl is surprised. She lifts the brunette and asks him to wait. Levertitia decides to take him with her to punish him later and suggests they go together. She decides to name the lizard Blackie. Soon she sees a light and realizes the exit is near. She thanks the lizard. At the Valtiel estate, a servant asks the Duke if he will go to the lake again. He says that the search has been going on for 10 years and no trace has been found. 10 years ago, a week passed without news from Levertitia. The servants said that it was cold and that Madame would be worried. The Duke believed that she would soon return victorious. When he saw the White Knights, he thought she was with them and ran out to meet her. But when I asked about Levertish, I heard apologies. He was told that she had disappeared during the battle and that the search had been unsuccessful. He didn't believe it because she promised to come back and protect him. The Duke began his own search, hoping that she had simply lost consciousness. He ordered to hang up posters and look for traces of dark magicians. A year passed, then a second, but she was still not found. He wondered if she had fallen into eternal sleep, although he didn't want to believe it. He was ready to forgive her being late, if only she would return with a smile. Now he has become strong enough to protect her. One day he comes into the office. The servant reports a letter from the Marquis of Brad. The letter contains an invitation to dinner and gratitude for saving his daughter. The search for a new duchess is also mentioned. The Duke tears up the letter. He orders them to tell her he will only come with his wife's permission. The servant is surprised by his departure. The Duke says he will return late and thinks about 10 years since her disappearance. He refuses to accept it, and suddenly the space in front of him cracks. He sees Levertitia saying that she has finally gotten out. The Duke rushes to her, but she loses consciousness. Waking up, the girl sees a familiar ceiling and notices that she is shackled, thinking about dark magicians. But at that very moment, a voice was heard saying that she shouldn't even try, because these were special shackles that could hold even a dragon. The heroine realizes she's standing before a duke. The young man calmly asks what the dark mages have come up with this time, and the girl realizes that such a thing simply can't be true. He just wonders why she has such a face, and she wonders if her commander has really come back to life. The young man continues to speculate whether dark magicians have learned to clone people or use resurrection magic. The girl notices that he's different from her commander. His face and hair color are similar, but the man in front of her is different. This bold character suddenly reminds her of the Duke, and the young lady cautiously asks if it is Kai. She immediately denies her words because her husband was much smaller and much nicer. The guy gets embarrassed, asks what she's even talking about, then turns away and says there's no point in messing around with such a stupid girl. The young lady screams for him to wait and asks him to remove her shackles first. The guy leaves the room but can't get rid of the thought that the girl called him Kai. He recalls the maid's words, that the clothes on the girl they brought in had been changed, and that it was the uniform of the White Knights. And that handkerchief seemed familiar to him. So he ordered the maid to remain silent, deciding to figure it out himself. Now he wants to believe it's true, but he's not sure. The only question that will decide everything is whether she knows that flower. Meanwhile, the main character is angry in the room, cursing the strong shackles because she has already spent 3 days here. The place looks too much like Duke Valtel's mansion, but she doesn't understand what happened to Kairos or who this man is. The servants don't speak, they just bring food, and the girl thinks that this could be a new trap of the dark magicians. If this really is the Duke's mansion, she should see someone she knows. At that moment, a maid enters the room. She addresses her as Madam, but the heroine asks who she is and why she calls her that. The maid wonders if her mistress doesn't recognize her. She introduces herself as Jessie and immediately rushes to hug her owner. Levertitia realizes that Jessie was once just a child. The maid says she missed her and admits how worried everyone was, as they thought their mistress had fallen into eternal slumber. Levertitia wonders if her memory has been damaged by magic. She asks where Kairos is, if this is the Duke's mansion. Jessie doesn't understand the question and says she hasn't seen him. Then the maid adds that the Duke himself brought the mistress here and visited her 3 days ago. The girl thinks this is not funny at all. Jessie assures that the Duke has been searching for the lady for 10 years without stopping. The main character, in shock, asks again about 10 years, because for her, only a few days have passed. Now it becomes clear to her why everything around her is so strange, and why everyone treats her with caution. She thinks about her brother and says she urgently needs to meet Kairos. The maid immediately offers to bring him. The young lady decides to go herself, but immediately realizes that the shackles do not allow her to move. She angrily asks why they chained her up in the first place. Jessie gets scared and says the mistress could destroy the entire mansion. Suddenly, a familiar squeak is heard, and the girl sees a lizard with a key. She asks in surprise if it is Chernish, since she had long wondered where he had disappeared to. After thanking him, Levertitia realizes that she can no longer just sit and wait. She opens the doors and wonders where to look for the Duke, but looking around the mansion, she freezes in shock. Pink flowers are everywhere. She notices their white petals and pink stamens and does not understand how such flowers can exist at all. The guy replies that they were created using dark magic. The girl turns around, wondering if it could really be Kairos. He says that after her disappearance, the mages went mad, and he was forced to hunt them. He promised each one mercy if they could perfectly recreate one specific flower. He hands the flower to Levertisha and asks if she knows its name. The girl replies that it cannot be named because this flower bears the name Levertisha, invented by her parents. She understands that only his family, parents and brother knew about him and her little husband, so she quietly asks if it really is Kai in front of her. The guy happily asks if she recognizes him, and the girl admits that she finds it hard to believe how much he has grown. She immediately asks what happened to Rudel and the Seltzer family. The Duke frowns and asks if she really cares about someone else now, and suggests that she think about the feelings of the one she left behind. The young lady is surprised, and the guy asks where she is going to run. After all, he says, she should be by his side. The girl understands that he has grown up somehow wrong. The Duke burns the flowers and says that he no longer needs these fakes. Levertisha doesn't understand why he suddenly summoned fire and turns to him. He replies that he will not let her leave, and the girl realizes that he is not listening to her at all. She understands that if this is not stopped now, it will be too late. Then the girl sharply hits him with her forehead and orders him to stop talking nonsense and pull himself together. The shocked boy asks what she did, and Levertisha notices that he's come to his senses. She says she understands his concern, but tying people up, neglecting them, and collecting mountains of flowers is wrong. She asks what his people will think if the Duke acts like a madman. The young man is surprised that she is really scolding him, and the girl screams that she hasn't even started yet. She asks why he has become so impudent because she raised him to be completely different. The boy realizes that no one has scolded him in a long time, and only Levertisha could speak like that. He even enjoys hearing her grumble. The Duke says she hasn't changed at all in 10 years, and admits he didn't believe it for a long time, thinking she simply lived somewhere else. Levertisha asks him what he means, and he admits that he believed more that she had abandoned him than that she had fallen into eternal sleep, since marriage with a child was a disgrace. The girl objects, calling it nonsense. He replies that he knows she wouldn't do such a thing, but he's heard enough gossip over the past 10 years and was afraid to show it to her. Levertisha says she promised to protect him, and that won't change, and apologizes for making him wait so long. The young man asks in surprise if she is comforting him and takes her hand. Then he asks her to pat his head. The girl is surprised and notices that he is now taller than her. He asks if he should bend down. He bends over, and Levertisha wonders why he has become so big. The guy asks her to tell him what happened to him, because he wants to hear everything. The girl thinks for a moment. It tells the story of the pursuit of magicians, the trap of space and time, and that it took 10 years to get out. Then she asks how much longer she has to talk. She understands that he has grown up so quickly, and now scolding him seems strange, as if he were a stranger in front of her. The Duke asks to continue, saying that his forehead still hurts from the blow. The girl laughs and asks what he ate to become so strong. He asks to show her. She shows him her forehead and asks if he can see that it is redder than his. The Duke kisses her forehead, and she's surprised. He reminds her that she thought it was cute at the wedding. She replies that he was a child then, but he says it makes no difference. Levertisha counters that he's an adult now and 18. The boy crosses his arms and declares that he's only 18 and still young. The young lady thinks that she clearly made a mistake because he was nicer before. The Duke says that 10 years is too long a time, and a lot has changed in that time. Levertisha asks what exactly, and he replies that he doesn't even know where to start. The conversation will be long. First, he tells her what she asked, and says that the Seltzer family and her brother are fine. The girl breathes a sigh of relief, but the Duke adds that's where the good news ends. She asks if the war has started. He replies that it was almost like that. When the knightly commanders, the pillars of the country, disappeared, the criminals felt free to do whatever they wanted. The dark magicians took advantage of this, increased their power, and the entire empire plunged into chaos. Many innocent people lost their lives, and the girl says that if she had stopped the magicians then, this could have been avoided. Clenching her fists, she blames herself, but the Duke says that this is not true, and no one could have predicted this. He claims that only the dark magicians who created the monsters of chaos are to blame. Levertisha asks what kind of monsters these are, but at that moment, someone calls the Duke. A cry rings out that a chaos monster has appeared on the duchy's territory. The girl wonders if it can really be that close. The Duke takes the weapon and orders the evacuation to begin, saying he'll handle it himself. Levertisha wonders if it's really a gun. He says that she will understand everything when she sees it for herself, and offers to go together, promising to protect her. A short time later, they find themselves in the forest. The Duke remarks that they were lucky to have dinner at the right time. There are few people around, and the residents have already evacuated. The girl still finds it hard to believe, but a lot of time had indeed passed. Kairos asked if she was uncomfortable and was slightly surprised. She replies that she is simply amazed at how confidently he sits in the saddle. Before, all he could do was cling to her. The guy smiles and says that it was a long time ago, suggesting they move on until dark. Levertisha understands that he grew up alone, and she still finds it difficult to accept. Suddenly, someone shouts to the Duke about the appearance of a chaos monster, and he asks where it is. The girl sees the creature and, in shock, asks what it is. The boy asks if it scares her, and says they're facing a chaos monster. Levertisha notes the name suits him, but wonders how to deal with him. After all, normal attacks seem useless. The Duke confirms that the monster is stronger and faster, and usually requires 10 knights to defeat one. He asks Levertisha to step back. The girl asks if he intends to fight alone. The monster looks in their direction, and Levertisha realizes she screamed too loudly. She says they need to keep their distance, but the Duke assures them that everything is under control. He proposes a bet that if he puts the monster into eternal sleep, she will owe him a wish, or, for example, a wedding. He fires a gun, and the monster immediately flies apart. The Duke calmly says they're already married. The girl is surprised, reminding him of the 10 knights, and he replies that 10 ordinary knights are needed. Her husband is, after all, the Duke of Valtail. The young lady immediately realizes that the aura she sensed was caused by Kairos' shot. This was definitely magical power. She'd only felt something similar from wizards before, but 10 years ago, he couldn't use magic, just like the previous Duke. The main character asks how he managed to use the magical weapon, and the guy replies that, as he already said, the dark magicians have completely gone crazy, and he was hunting them. In the process, he awakened a small portion of their powers. Although he is not a dark mage, he is now capable of wielding magical weapons, albeit with considerable effort. The girl realizes that a mage who awakened his abilities, rather than was born with them, is like someone who learned to breathe underwater. She wonders what he's been doing all this time. At that moment, she hears eerie screams and notices the monster beginning to gather itself back together. The girl, surprised, asks if it's still alive. The young lady is perplexed by how he survived a gunshot to the head. The Duke explains that such creatures don't always fall into eternal slumber from such a wound, as there are specific points of instantaneous escape. They're called the core. The main character asks where it is, and the guy replies that it's usually in the head or the heart. Levertisha asks if destroying the core is enough, as that would make everything sound too simple. The boy is surprised by her words, but before he can finish, everyone sees the girl rushing toward the monster. Levertisha understands that after Kairos' explanation, everything became clear. If the core is not in the head, then only the heart remains. The girl leaps at the monster and slashes at it. The Duke immediately runs up to her and realizes she attacked at point-blank range. He asks if everything is okay with her, and the main character asks with a smile if he was really worried about her. Levertisha replies that everything is fine, because they hit all the weak spots, and now the monster should be undead. The Duke reminds him again that this usually requires 10 knights, but the girl objects that ordinary ones will suffice, and asks if he has forgotten who was once called the dog of the battlefield. With a smile on her face, she adds that she is hungry and suggests they go back. The young man realizes that this is the real Levertisha. He thought that over the past 10 years, he had become the one who could protect her. Somehow, all of this seems unfair. At this point, one of the maids asks another if she doesn't think the Duke's mood has noticeably improved in recent days. After Madame's disappearance, he hardly left the estate and did not smile at all, but now he began to walk in the garden, and even smile slightly sometimes. The second maid asks what affected him so much, but the colleague replies he doesn't know, but his appetite is simply ravenous. That amount of food in one sitting is too much. One of the maids thanks the others for their help and asks if they've brought food. She says she'll take the Duke's lunch herself, so they can go. When she leaves, the girls whisper to each other about whether she really doesn't need help. The other one replies that she said so herself and suggests that her friend take a break. Jessie realizes everyone is curious. She brings the food into the room, wishes Madame bon appétit, and the main character thanks her. After some time, the Duke turns to the lady and asks how much longer she plans to hide. She just shrugs, saying who knows, and ponders where to start her meal. The guy thinks it looks like she's been starved. The girl reminds everyone that everyone thinks she's dead, and only 10 years have passed. Someone might recognize her, and then there would be a huge uproar. So now it's better to hide and get used to a new life. The guy replies that she can do this until the end of her days. He says he will do everything so that she doesn't have to lift a finger, and asks how she likes the idea of a quiet life next to him. The boy realizes he no longer cares about anything, but as soon as she emerges into the light, the whole world will demand heroic deeds from her again, and she will have to return to the war against the dark mages. He's afraid she'll disappear again. As a child, he could only watch her go, but now, if he tries, she won't have to fight. The Duke says Letty can just rest. The protagonist replies with a smile that she doesn't want to. This life would suffocate her. She must save people from sorcerers. And the boy realizes that she still thinks first of all about others. At this point, he notices in the newspaper that Aaron Harris has made his move and mentions it. The main character asks who he is, but the Duke replies that it is better not to talk about him. Levertitia smirks, saying he's a liar, because the excitement is written all over his face. She snatches the newspaper and asks to see it. The newspaper says that Count Aaron is the best knight of their era, and he has announced his intention to participate in the competition. The girl wonders if he's really that good, since she's never heard his name before. The Duke replies that he's gained popularity during her absence. Levertitia notices that this is not all that is written there, and asks if he is really the Duke's rival, since he actively hunts dark mages and looks impressive. The guy immediately snatches the newspaper from her hands, repeating that it's not worth talking about. He tears up the pages, and the girl complains that she hasn't finished reading yet. The lady then turns to the maid and asks if Kairos has a problem with this carry ice. The Duke replies that it's about the competition, and he doesn't like the Count's involvement. The girl asks what exactly the problem is. She notes that if the newspapers made such a fuss about it, it must be something important, and she wants to understand what is wrong here. The Duke explains that this is a competition to select a new commander for the White Knights. The protagonist is surprised why the commander is chosen this way. This hadn't happened before, as it was usually appointed by the Emperor or the previous commander. The Duke replies that this is precisely why such competitions had previously been pointless, but after the lady's disappearance, the seat remained empty. The girl is amazed and asks if he really means to say that the commander's position has been empty for 10 years, and shouldn't the Emperor have appointed someone? The Duke replies that appointing a new commander would mean admitting her immersion in eternal sleep, and neither His Majesty nor the knights could accept this. Now the young lady understands that everything is clear. They've been waiting for her return for 10 whole years. The boy adds that the Scarlet Knights changed their commander just a month later, and it was Egan Kellers. Levertitia thinks it's amazing the country is still standing. She wonders why they had to change the commander and feels like she's missing something important. Suddenly, shock overwhelms her. She realizes she'd completely forgotten she wasn't the only one trapped. She asks what Kairos did to Enzod, who was with her and did not abandon her there. The Duke asks with displeasure whether she really needs to ask about another man, but the main character asks him not to change the subject. The guy replies that she has nothing to worry about, he took care of him. The girl immediately asks where he is now. After some time, they descend into the dungeon. The protagonist is surprised that such a place exists in the Duke's estate. They approach the cell where the former commander of the Scarlet Knights lies, and the girl asks if it really is him. She wonders why he's in this state and why he still hasn't woken up. Levertitia says she understands why they locked him up in the first place, but now he needs help. Kairos replies that he's already called a doctor. An examination revealed minimal injuries, almost no damage to his body, and everything necessary had been done, but the cause of his loss of consciousness is unknown. The girl asks if this is the effect of the dark mages. Trap. The red-haired man offers to simply leave him at Duke Everett's estate, but the girl abruptly refuses. He is crucial to uncovering the connections between the dark mages and the Duke. The boy wonders what she's talking about. The young lady replies that 10 years ago, during an attack on the shelter, she accidentally overheard a conversation. The dark mages were acting according to Duke Everett's plan. Kairos asks if this man was part of the plan, but the girl admits she's not sure. He doesn't seem like the kind of coward who would bow down to a trap. nor the kind who would throw himself into it. Perhaps he can help. The Duke agrees and adds that the Duke's child has disappeared, and he has made little attempt to look for him. After Egan's promotion, he seemed to be waiting for something. There's a chance a rift has developed in their family. If the Duke truly had allied with the Dark Mages, he knew in advance of the approaching era of chaos. As one of the Empire's leading families, he always kept a low profile and didn't even attempt to address the issue. On the contrary, he was hoping for the situation to worsen. The protagonist says they can turn this to their advantage and gain an advantage. The guy replies that if there is serious evidence of connections with dark magicians, his power will not matter. It will be easy to stop him. The young lady says she needs proof. They'll get it when he wakes up, but she's not sure the man will cooperate. The Duke replies that they will need more evidence to prevent him from getting away with it, but it will not be easy. Before her story, he hadn't even suspected him. Letitia adds that his brazen behavior showed that he was confident of his impunity. The Duke agrees and says that everything, including her disappearance, was part of his plan. Now things won't go as he planned. The heroine asks what they're aiming for, and the Duke asks if she wants to know the reason for their union. Letitia replies that the past doesn't concern her. She's only interested in what they'll do next. It doesn't matter how much influence they gain if the Empire ends up destroyed by the monsters of chaos. The guy says that magicians are capable of anything for their desires, but the question is whether the Duke himself wants it. These are two forces with opposing goals, and they must have something in common in order to unite. The Duke is power-hungry and plans to seize the throne with the help of mages. The protagonist asks if His Majesty is all right. The young man replies that there's nothing to worry about now. His popularity has even grown. The Emperor does everything to protect the Empire and quickly responds to the threat of dark magicians. The lady agrees, since he had previously given orders for their extermination. The Emperor always told her and the commander to prepare for the future. It seems he himself wasted no time. The Duke adds that thanks to this, the Empire strengthened its position on the international stage. He was the first to act when the monsters of chaos emerged, and he advanced the idea of a national union when the continent plunged into chaos. Many nobles were opposed, but the states that rejected the union had already fallen. Letitia understands that their knowledge of dark mages is extremely limited. The boy claims that, in the end, the Emperor was right. Even the Duke, who usually ignored His Majesty, did not resist, surprised by such a sudden change. The young lady says that it took Everett some time to change his plans, and he did not expect the Emperor to react so quickly. Everett has a keen strategic mind. If an unexpected variable arises, he might make a mistake that leads to proof. Kairos says his downfall will then be only a matter of time. The girl appeared just in time, and now they have the most reliable knight in the world. After some time, someone approaches the vice commander. Barton notices how noisy it is around and asks what happened. The boy replies that he learned of Count Aaron Harris's participation in the competition, but the vice commander says that he already knew about it. The knight is surprised and asks if he knew in advance and if he will go against him. The vice commander replies that everyone who came to him said so, and yes, of course he will. Aaron Harris is a man who rose from the very bottom and earned the title of Count through sheer skill. They say he's a comet and will become the finest knight of the age. But this sounds ridiculous, because the greatest knight of their time can only be the commander of Letitia. The vice captain reassures him, telling him not to worry. A stone won't defeat him. The guy replies that's not the point. The vice commander asks what he's talking about, and he continues. He says the Duchy of Voltaire will also be participating. The knight is surprised and asks if the Duke himself will really be coming. They tell him no, another family member will be sent. The knight is angry, realizing he knows full well what this competition means. Lady Letitia will be declared immersed in eternal sleep, and a battle for the position of commander will begin. It is clear that the competition is aimed at destroying her status. Even personal participation would be insufficient, but he's only sending a representative. The boy asks when the competition will take place, and the servant replies that there are 3 days left, only 3 days. The boy remembers that the captain promised to return alive and wonders if she really doesn't intend to keep her word. Meanwhile, the main character is training and realizes there's still time before the competition. She's been missing from the Seltzer family's estate for a long time. Suddenly, someone finds her and tells her she's back. The girl asks if something happened. The Duke replies that he hasn't told her one thing about her brother. Letitia asks what exactly, and the guy says that Rudel has gone crazy. The main character is shocked. She says that before returning from the war, she received a letter from him through the butler, and everything was fine with him then. She cries out, asking what happened in those 10 years if the Seltzer family was safe. The boy replies that it's not just her absence. It all started much earlier, and the letters from her brother were fakes. The protagonist is overcome with shock. She wonders if it was all a lie, and immediately asks what really happened to her brother, begging Kairos to tell her the truth. The man says her uncle constantly bullied Rudel. He humiliated him, asking how such an incompetent man could be head of the house, and mocked his sister, who had lived in filth her entire life for the benefit of strangers. Rudel apologized to his sister, blaming himself for everything, while his uncle called him a monster who had killed his parents and sister. Under such pressure, the boy eventually lost his mind. The Valtail family tried to help with the treatment, but recovery will take a long time. The Duke apologizes for not noticing it sooner, but the girl takes his hand and says it's not his fault. She says that she is his sister and did not notice anything herself, so she is grateful to the Duke. The girl sincerely thanks him for taking care of her brother for her. The guy replies that this is natural, because Rudel is part of his family, and admits that it was worth visiting the mansion earlier. After some time, the girl wonders how she could have failed to realize her brother was being bullied. She wants to tell Rudel that he's innocent and that they can live together again. But if even her name drives him crazy, she doesn't know if she can be near him. She decides it's best to wait until he gets better and is about to leave, but suddenly bumps into someone. The guy rudely asks who she is. The girl recognizes Patrick and is perplexed why his uncle's son is here. Patrick says he understands, and from the look of her, she's just another debt collector. Levertisha wonders if he's inherited his uncle's debts, but he declares the time has come. He says that the guy's crazy sister has gone into eternal sleep. He's been waiting for 10 years, and now he's going to shake out all the money until that psycho also goes into eternal sleep. The main character immediately grabs him and declares that he will come with her. Patrick demands that the tax collector let him go and is amazed at her strength. The girl throws him to the ground. The guy screams at her to ask if she knows who she's dealing with, but she coldly orders him to shut his filthy mouth. She asks if he's really going to spout this nonsense right in front of her. Seeing her face, Patrick realizes it's Levertisha and starts to crawl away. A young lady steps on his hand and asks where his courage has gone. She says his father abused the child until he went mad, and 10 years later, he came to shake down his debts. She says she's ready to send them into eternal sleep 10 times over, but his father has already fallen into eternal sleep. Before that, she needs to check one thing. The girl asks if he is related to her parents, but at that moment, she hears a monster attack. Patrick is terrified, foaming at the mouth. Levertisha realizes they're near Seltzer Manor and can't take the monster there, so they need to take it deeper into the forest. After a while, the lady runs away from the monster and throws it to him, so that he can catch up if he can. She remembers that there should be a cliff here, but she sees nothing and wonders if the area has really changed in 10 years. She stepped out briefly, taking only a dagger. There was no choice. She had to deal with the monster in one blow. Levertisha hesitates between hitting the head and the heart, chooses the heart, and checks the result, but the monster continues to move. She realizes she made a mistake and thinks about what to do next, but at that moment, something pierces the monster. The main character is surprised, and the Duke runs up to her, asking if everything is okay with her. Levertisha is relieved to think it's Kairos. He asks if she's hurt, reminding her that he told her to take a weapon, and then is surprised to see a sword in the monster. The girl says she doesn't know where he came from, when suddenly, someone else asks if the lady is okay. The main character feels like she has seen this face before, and the Duke is perplexed as to where this man came from. It turns out to be Aaron Harris. He turns to Duke Valtail with a smile. He explains that a chaos monster appeared, and he chased after it, then asks if the man is okay. The girl thinks his name sounds familiar. She remembers reading about him in the newspaper. He seems popular and has a good personality, but the Duke immediately shuts Levertish down and says that he will take care of everything himself and let Aaron get rid of the monster's body. Aaron remarks that the Duke seems to know the man, but he coldly replies that he has no need to know him. The Count turns around and says that, as he promised, he will deal with the body, and then leaves. Levertisha realizes that she has seen her husband from a new side, and his character turns out to be quite difficult. Later they continue on their way, and the guy asks why she went there, because she said that she was going to the Seltzer mansion. She didn't even take a sword, and if something happened, how would she deal with the monster with her bare hands? The young lady asks if he's very angry. He replies no, apologizes, and says it's not about her, but about Aaron Harris. The girl thinks that Aaron seemed like an ordinary, polite person, and she doesn't understand why there is such hostility between them. They continue their conversation, and she asks if he really hates him. Her husband asks her if she thinks he's handsome. Levertisha is surprised, and the Duke asks why she stutters. He asks if she's really fallen in love and is planning to leave him for someone else. She notices that strange look in his eyes. She pushes him away and asks what he's even talking about. He replies that since she denies it, he must have guessed right, because everyone falls in love with him. The girl immediately says that's not true. She asks how she could fall in love with a man she sees for the first time if she had already married Kairos. The guy calms down and says that some people fall in love at first sight. He moves on and suggests forgetting about it. Levertisha wonders, since when he cares about other people's appearances, she tells him not to worry, adding that if he wants her opinion, he's the most handsome. Kairos replies that there's no need to state the obvious. The young lady grabs him and calls him an arrogant brat. Later, the Count's subordinates report a strange discovery. While dissecting the monster's body, they discovered a dagger inside, causing general confusion. The Count asks if the dagger was inside the monster. They confirm that the blade penetrated the heart, adding that it resembles the Count's own weapon. Aaron replies that he never uses daggers, preferring a longsword. He admits that the find isn't his, and the mystery remains. The subordinate suggests getting rid of the dagger due to the risk of infection, but Novikov stops him and recalls another person connected with this event. After some thought, he says he might know the dagger's owner. His confidence sounds mysterious. The day of the night's tournament arrives. The streets are full of people. Everyone is invited to line up for the signature shashlik, as such a day rarely comes around. The tournament is in full swing, with debate and betting raging. One knight bets on Count Harris, while another notes that almost everyone else has done the same and there's not much to be gained. The young man says that betting on the Count is still better than believing in the captain of the Scarlet Knights, who, according to rumors, escaped from the monster, leaving a woman with a child. Some people wonder how such a person could even be appointed captain, while others agree that the situation looks sad. The main character passes by, wearing a mask. She hopes not to be recognized, believing that the flow of events will conceal her identity. Someone in the crowd notices her good mood and asks if she heard anything interesting. The girl smiles and replies that nothing special. The Duke asks if she really hasn't heard anything and mentions a rumor about a man who disappeared 10 years ago, adding that it's hardly worth believing. The young man insists he's telling the truth and even swears. Levertisha smiles, finding this amusing. The conversation breaks off as they approach the arena. The competition has already begun, and the girl turns her attention to the fight. She sees the White Knights, Vice Captain fighting. His movements are precise, and it's immediately clear he's in the right place. Barton defeats his opponent, the crowd cheers, and the announcer announces the next fight. The fights follow one another. Levertisha realizes her turn is near. She's nervous, but she's ready. The Duke turns to her for support. He tells her she can handle it. His words give her confidence, and she prepares to enter the arena. Questions about the Duke's family come from the crowd. Letty's name is mentioned for the first time, and many think the fight will end quickly due to her appearance. The announcer announces Letty's departure from the Duchy of Valtail. Her opponent is Malek Blonde, son of Viscount Blonde. Malek loudly declares that he will not fight with Small Fry and demands Barton or Count Harris. Letty covers her ears, thinking he's trying to scream her to sleep. She regrets having to waste her energy on such an opponent. She asks if he knows the rules of the tournament and reminds him that he needs to defeat her first, adding a mocking remark. Malek becomes enraged and shouts that he will smear her on the ground, demanding that the fight begin. The host asks if she'll keep her mask on. Letty answers affirmatively, and the match begins. Malek lunges at her, but the girl easily dodges, mocking his clumsiness. She parries the blow and makes a caustic remark. The crowd freezes, realizing Malek has misjudged his opponent. Letty asks where he gets so much pride from, and the audience begins to doubt his strength. A moment later, his weapon is knocked out of his hands. The crowd roars, but Letty stands calmly. The Duke grins. The announcer announces Letty's victory, and the audience applauds. Malek can't believe she lost and asks how she was able to win so easily. Letty calmly asks if he's surprised by being defeated by a Small Fry. After that, she defeats every opponent in a row. Residents of the capital are starting to support her. Victories come easy, but the attention is becoming too much. She notices Barton in battle and sees his impatience, but also his precision and calculation. The girl realizes he's not living up to his full potential. He wins, and Count Aaron Harris is announced as the finalist. The crowd cheers. Barton leaves the arena, and Letty wonders about the reason for his haste. From the crowd, a confused voice of a girl is heard, not knowing what to do next. Letty recognizes Jessie and wonders about her connection to Barton. She suspects that Jessie is not indifferent to him, but she understands that a lot has changed in 10 years. Letty enters the arena. It's the finale. She promises herself to avenge Justin. The announcer announces the fight between Aaron Harris and Letty of Voltaire. The atmosphere is tense. The Count asks if she'll keep her mask on. Letty answers affirmatively, and he smiles attentively. She asks why he's smiling. Aaron says only 2 people in his life have ever spoken to him like that, and one of them was her. He says that he senses great talent in her and will fight with all his might. Letty grins, telling him not to expect an easy fight from her. The announcer gives the signal. Aaron attacks immediately. Letty realizes he's incredibly fast and dangerous. The Count admits the fight is tough and says he's always been ahead of Barton, but with her it's different. He talks about his strengths, and Letty asks ironically if he is sure. She knocks the weapon out of his hands and remembers 10 years of waiting for Kairos and the empty place of commander. Defeat is impossible. She must live up to expectations. The host declares her victory. The crowd demands she remove her mask and calls her the tournament's finest knight. Letty clutches her sword, feeling a sense of genuine recognition.